Welcome to Conscious Dominance, a DSRX studio production. These weekly conversations explore how to approach mindful leadership and inner dominance within the powerful container of committed, intentional relationships. Join Eric as he invites new dialogues, sharing practical insights for how the craft of consciousness opens the aperture to love, serve, and connect with unwavering presence.
Eric, it's good to see you.
Good to see you.
Today on the Conscious Dominance podcast, we are going to talk about what we're calling the 6 pillars of conscious dominance. And for us, these are the things that have shown up as being necessary for us to be able to embody and live and grow in our dominance in a way that is conscious, that does bring awareness and something deeper to these kind of dom-sub relationships. So to get us started, I'm going to start off with the first of these 6 pillars. And that first one is accountability. And to bring accountability to dominance, for me, means bringing responsibility and taking responsibility for your own life. Because if we're asking a woman to submit to us, we are asking her to let go of control. We're asking her to surrender and to give up some sort of authority in her life and to follow our authority. And the reason that accountability is such an important pillar in this is because if we're asking that of her, we need to be able to display that we have it for ourselves. So taking accountability means taking accountability, obviously, for how we're showing up in the relationship. Taking ownership of who we are and what we do. Taking responsibility for the way that we act and the way that we treat her. But also, it means taking ownership of our own life beyond and outside of the relationship as well. It means really living an accountable life. It means being able to show up in our life in every way from a sense of self-ownership. And, this applies to the relationship because every relationship takes 2 people. It takes 2 individuals to come together in a relationship, and the relationship can never be stronger than the strength of the individuals that are in it. And the relationship can never be more conscious than the consciousness or the awareness level of the 2 individuals who are in it. So stepping forward in accountability means being willing to look at the places in our lives where we have not been showing up in the ways that we need to, and to take ownership of those. One of the things I talk about responsibility is this concept that event plus response equals outcome, because responsibility is maintaining the ability to respond. So first of all, that means we can't be reactive. We can't jump into triggered emotional reactions. Now, we're going to sometimes, but we have to work to see ourselves in and through those and to grow beyond them in order to really live a life of responsibility. We have to take control of our responses to the events that happen around us. And the problem that I think a lot of us have, and I know that I've had in my past, is that we see something that happens, an event, and we assume that is the outcome. We don't have any control. But when we take ownership of and responsibility for our life, what we're doing is we are maintaining the ability to respond to every event as it happens. So when something happens, rather than having a victim mindset or a defeatist mindset towards this is just the way it is and life is happening to me, living a life of accountability or responsibility means looking at the things that happen in life, not as happening to you, but as things to which you can respond, because now you are happening to life. And I love the lyric from a classic rock band Rush in their song Free Will, where the lyric is, if you choose not to decide, you still have made a choice. And this is what accountability really is to me, is being able to choose how you're going to respond. And therefore having control of the outcome. We can have control of the outcome when we respond in a way that lets us shape the events into what it is that we want them to be. And we get in a lot of trouble in our relationships in every part of our life because the way we're showing up in our life beyond the relationship impacts how we are received and how she feels about us in the relationship. But when we abdicate our choice, the fact that we have a choice in everything, we have a choice in how we respond, we have a choice in how we feel about things, we have a lot of choices in the actions that we take for any given thing in our lives, in our relationships, in dominance. We always have a choice. One of the choices is always to do nothing. So when we look at things through a lens of having limited choices, we are not able to step into accountability. To maintain the ability to step into accountability, we have to be willing to look at all of the options that are available to us and choose the right one. Not just the one that feels best to us, not the one that lets us take something from her, for example, but the one that's right. Or the way that I look at this is the most in alignment with truth. And then to be responsible for the outcome. And if the outcome doesn't turn out the way that we want it, to step into responsibility for that outcome. Like, doesn't mean I have to blame myself or shit on myself because things didn't go the way I wanted them to. But if I take responsibility, then I'm responsible for the outcome. And if I need to change something or do something different to fix whatever it is, or to deal with the consequences or the ramifications of taking responsibility, then I do that. But accountability matters in conscious dominance because we need to first be dominant for ourselves. We need to have control over our lives and control over our realities to the best of our ability. And we do that for ourselves. We also do it because I like to say we inspire a woman's submission by the life that we are living. We allow her submission to be what it is and how she naturally feels about us. So I'd be curious to hear your reflections on accountability.
Thank you. I think you covered a lot of it that I was feeling and thinking. I just wanted to bring up one of the challenges and issues that I've had as I've taken more and more accountability of my life is that I tend to feel an overwhelm. And as I feel that overwhelm, I tend to feel as I'm moving away from a victim mindset. And because essentially what you're saying is stop being a victim, take responsibility for your life and everything in it. You're also going to feel an overwhelm, especially if that's not been something you've done your whole life. You're going to look around and you're going to see that your life is not what there's going to be a gap usually between where you feel like you want to be and where you are. And in that gap, and often in the world around you, and the challenge is not to be emotionally overwhelmed and to take accountability for one's emotions. And one of the things that I found to be really helpful in that is I can get in a place where I can get in a sort of malaise, feeling down on myself. And one of the things that Rachel's actually been really helpful through her work, her company that I'm now part of, Arosha, she has something called the Mud Room. It's a practice of a ladder, an emotional ladder, where when you're in the throes of it, it's like being in a mud room. Like you have to find yourself the capacity to take responsibility for your emotions, see where you're at, knock the mud off of yourself before you enter into the house, before you come into and be with her, before you come and do the dominance. You have to take accountability for your emotions. And there needs to be a space that I think of as the mudroom that she's really taught me really well. And her metaphor has been really helpful. It's this space that's in between life and then the activity where she's at, whatever the action is. Pause, do the work, the emotional inner work, the accountability to do the inner work so that you don't bring your shit, your mud into the activity with her.
Naturally feels about us. So I'd be curious to hear your reflections on accountability.
Thank you. I think you covered a lot of it that I was feeling and thinking. I just wanted to bring up one of the challenges and issues that I've had as I've taken more and more accountability of my life is that I tend to feel an overwhelm. And as I feel that I'm overwhelmed, I tend to feel as I'm moving away from a victim mindset. And because essentially what you're saying is stop being a victim, take responsibility for your life and everything in it. You're also going to feel an overwhelm, especially if that's not been something you've done your whole life. You're going to look around and you're going to see that your life is not what there's going to be a gap usually between where you feel like you want to be and where you are. And in that gap, and often in the world around you. And the challenge is not to be emotionally overwhelmed and to take accountability for one's emotions. And one of the things that I found to be really helpful in that is I can get in a place where I can get in a sort of malaise, feeling down on myself. And one of the things that Rachel's actually been really helpful through her work, her company that I'm now part of, Arosha, she has something called the Mud Room. It's a practice of a ladder, an emotional ladder, where when you're in the throes of it, it's like being in a mud room. Like you have to find yourself the capacity to take responsibility for your emotions, see where you're at, knock the mud off of yourself before you enter into the house, before you come into and be with her, before you come and do the dominance. You have to take accountability for your emotions. And there needs to be a space that I think of as the mudroom that she's really taught me really well. And her metaphor has been really helpful. It's this space that's in between life and then the activity where she's at, whatever the action is. Pause, do the work, the emotional inner work, the accountability to do the inner work so that you don't bring your shit, your mud into the activity with her. And that's, I think, one of the biggest things of accountability and responsibility that it's still challenging. This weekend, I wasn't so good at it. It's still really hard. But that metaphor has been really helpful. And I feel like I just wanted to add that part of the emotional accountability and the overwhelm with, and being responsible for that.
Absolutely. So you've got the second one here. Go ahead.
Yeah. So the second one, I think in many ways is very similar to the first one, but I think the inner strength, and the word that I was using for that was valor. I like the word valor. And I feel like it encapsulates the grit that is necessary to proceed. Once you take accountability for your life, you've got to have courage. Similar to what I just was talking about with that mudroom, you have to face the reality. You have to face the feelings and energies and emotions that you've got going on in your life. You have to face the facts of your life. You have to face the despondency of the people under your care. You have to face your woman. You have to face the reality of your bank account. You have to face your physical ailments. Whatever it is that you're facing, it takes fortitude and it takes resilience to be able to get up every day and show up to that. And I feel like, yes, it's courageous, but it's a step up from courage. And that's why I like that word valor, because it includes love. It includes a certain gallantry. It includes a certain part of us that's like a worthwhile worthiness of what it is to be the highest traits of masculinity. And this is the kind of strength that we're asking for. Yes, it's strength, but it's first and foremost a strength on the inside that then becomes a natural outgrowth on the outside. And so the inner strength is the foundational work that's necessary so that all of your activities, your strength, your power, your sword is done from an alignment, from a virtuous place, from a place that's not about your ego, and that you have the courage to slay your own ego. And that if you need to step down or step aside or sheathe your sword, you have the valor to do so. In many ways, it speaks of the qualities of medieval knighthood or samurai, that there's a certain code to the way that you act. And this code is encapsulated in all of these pillars. But I feel like this code, spear of it, is this idea of valor. The other part, I looked up the etymology of the word valor, and it speaks to value. And it speaks to the worth of worthiness and respect of manly qualities, the value that you have for yourself. You have to place a value on yourself. You have to place value that your values and is yourself. So when you value yourself, you're not valuing your desires and your wants, and you may value those things eventually, but first and foremost, the thing that's driving you is a certain qualitative, people often talk about as morals or ethics, but that's for you to decide and define. As more and more men are out there not assigning themselves to a particular religion, if they do not have an inner resolve, an inner sense of what their values are, they will fall prey to their ego. They will fall prey to their more lower base instincts. And the inner strength and the valor that's necessary to proceed with this is really about looking in the mirror and looking at yourself and assessing what are the qualities inside of you that need to stay and what are the qualities that need to go. And you got to have the valor and the courage and the inner strength to do the inner work that's necessary to start cutting trees, cutting parts of yourself. That work is very difficult. That work may require you to check out, to take a rest, to slow down. It may require you to speed up. Whatever's necessary for you to do is the work that is really truly what it is to be valorous. Sometimes it's asking you to be more gentle. Sometimes it's asking you to be more forceful. It's having that quality, that capacity to discern. This is really what it is when we speak about inner strength, when we speak about valor, when we speak about having the self-control. And like you talked about, and within accountability, it's worth repeating, and I think it falls under here. It's having the freedom to not react in a way that we've been habituated to react, but to be able to get to that place where we can choose how we respond. And so that capacity to do that, the work that's required to be able to get to that place, requires you to do valorous work, inner work. It is, being a conscious Dom is a meritocracy. You have to be the person she wants to submit to. It's not entitlement. You're not entitled to it. You have to earn it. And you earn it by the way that you live your life and the way that you are in the rough moments when she's upset, when shit storm around you. How do you hold the fort? How do you hold your stuff? How are you composed? How are you able to lead when everything else is falling flat? Can you be restrained when you need to be restrained? Can you act when you need to act? Can you speak up when you need to speak up? That is what it's about. You don't get it automatically. You have to earn it. It's a meritocracy. and you have to earn it every day. And every day that you slip a little bit, you got to climb your ass back up. And there's grit involved. And that's what we're talking about. That's the valor. And you need to have that grit as you move up and you get knocked down, you get up, and you're not running around blaming anybody for it. You take responsibility, you look in the mirror, and you keep going and you move forward. That's what this is about. That's the inner strength. And at the end of the day, it's you with you. You can't go to your woman. You can't always have a friend that's around. You're going to have to get your ass up. You're going to have to walk out and you're going to have to do the work, but you do it with kindness to yourself. And that's where, when I talked about courage with love, you've got to have self-respect, because it won't last long if you're a tyrant to yourself. You're going to be like, fuck yourself. You don't want to do the work anymore because you're an asshole to yourself. You got to be a good leader to yourself. You know what I mean? And that's where we're going to speak even more about. But tell me, what else you got to say here about this word?
Yeah. Inner strength, valor, courage. I think I even heard you use the word virtue, which I love the word virtue, because boy, is there one thing that people hate in modern world is the idea that there might be a reason to live a good life, even if you're not forced to. But I think about this. I think about dominance so often gets conflated with aggression and forcefulness. And for a woman to submit, we need to be able to provide some safety for her. We talked about that in a recent episode. We spent a whole episode talking about creating safety. But we have to be able to create safety, which means she has to feel safe with us. She has to feel safe to let go in our presence, let go of control for herself in our presence, which means a lot of times if we want her to submit to us, we get a lot farther with gentleness and warmth than we do with forcefulness. And I love this statement that there's a certain kind of gentleness that only true strength can afford to have. Because when we hold a really solid, true inner strength, we can afford to be gentle because we don't feel threatened, because the strength is in here. And the threat isn't out there. It's not in her willingness or lack thereof to obey. It's not in how she submits. It's not in what happens in the circumstances of the world around us. Our strength isn't drawn from that. It's drawn from in here. And that will help to create the safety that a woman is going to need in order to surrender, to submit, to follow, and see us as someone who has our shit together, so she doesn't have to have her shit together. Submission is letting go of control. It is inherently out of control, which is inherently scary, which means we are the ones who provide the respite from fear by being strong enough to hold her when shit is going haywire. So that, I love the word valor. I love the reference back to the medieval with that. I have a great book called The Complete Gentleman that's all about living that kind of valorous, virtuous life. It's a really good one to check out sometime. Our third one in these 6 pillars is integrity. And I love this word integrity because it gets so much at the fact that we have to be following something. We can't just dom from our whims, as you said a little bit ago. We can't just dominate from our own kind of childish desires. We have to be something. We have to stand for something. And baseline, basic level integrity is, first of all, do what you say you're going to do. We be seen as dominant. And really, that's what this conscious dominance thing is about, is it's not just to be a dom, it's to really be dominant, to be that level of strong and in control, and to be perceived that way as a natural extension of, like you said, the way that you're living your life. living a life of integrity, living a life of following through on what you say you're going to do is one way that we show that we are a person who has congruence. This is one of my favorite words, is congruence, meaning I'm the same in here as I am out there. I'm the same person when I'm in the public life, when I'm talking on this podcast, when I'm on social media, when I'm being interviewed on other people's podcasts. I'm the same person there as I am when I'm sitting alone in the dark, in private, in secret, that I have no different sides of me. I'm always the same person. And that's a life of integrity, to be that much in line where there aren't pieces of me I need to tuck away or hide. This is shadow work to deal with our shame. It's all of that inner kind of excavation work that we have to do, because we have to be willing to look at the things we don't want to see, the things that we tuck away, the things we hide, the things that we keep in secret, the pieces of ourselves we're ashamed of. All of these things have to be dealt with so that we can live a congruent life. And self-discipline is an important part of integrity, because we've got to be able to hold ourselves to, for example, living a virtuous life. When something pulls us to fall back into old patterns, for example. And one of the things I love about that etymology of valor that you brought up a few minutes ago is the reference to values. One of the most important things, and one of the biggest like clicks that fell into place for me, was what seems so obvious now, that if I want to live a life of integrity, I have to live in integrity to something. It's not just, well, I said I was going to clean the garage and I cleaned the garage. Okay, yes, that is kindergarten level integrity. To be public with the person that you aspire to be. What are my values? What is it that I value the highest? To be willing to declare that to yourself and to others. And then, because you've declared it, because you've made the statement, because your submissive knows that you value, for example, truth, honesty, whatever it might be, when you claim this to be that what you value, then she's going to feel when you are out of alignment with that value. You said that you are living a life of honesty. And then if you lie, guess what? She's going to feel it. And that's going to call you on the carpet to living out of integrity with the person that you claim that you are. And so that means that you have to hold yourself to a standard of behavior, a standard of comportment, a standard of energetic alignment between your actions and your words. And that is next level integrity. It's pretty easy to follow through on the things you say you're going to do, but following through on being the man that you claim that you want to be, that you aspire to be, and to be willing to say, God, I really want to do that. But, well, I'll give you an example of this. In my past, I used to buy new cars every 2 or 3 years. So I had car payments all the time. And at one point, Dawn and I decided we wanted to get completely out of debt, down to zero. And I had a lot of debt at that point in my life, like a lot. And so along this path, somewhere in there is when I made my first list of what my values are. And at that point, freedom was what I defined as my highest value, with freedom from debt being one of the expressions of what freedom meant for me. Then I'd been driving my car for a few years, started to get sick of it, wanted something new, something shiny, something faster, sportier, newer, fancier, whatever. If I had just gone and bought that car that I wanted to buy, I would have been showing that I was not in integrity to that value, that I said it, but I didn't actually fucking live it. And being willing to say no to your whims, to say no to yourself, to the older version of you, the piece of you that you're trying to outgrow, to say yes to the man that you're becoming, that's next level integrity. That's conscious dominant integrity. That's dominance over your own self and congruence between your words and your actions. To me, that is where integrity lines up with dominance, in that we live our lives in a way that reflects who we are and who we want to be.
So I think of integrity as whole. When you have it, it's something's integral, integrated, it's whole. And one of the biggest lessons that I had to learn was that the part of me that I thought was bad and the part of me that I thought was good had to come together, and I had to become whole. And that's when I figured out how to live in integrity. Because I had to stop judging part of myself as bad, part of myself as good, to bring them all together and integrate in the integration, the wholeness, and then to act from there and honor all of it. And then live by these the valor, the accountability, the integrity, and the other values and pillars that we're speaking of. But I love that word. I love how it encapsulates and holds the wholeness of it. And that when we're living in a time where things seem crazy, everything seems incongruent all over the place, you can hold yourself in wholeness. Whatever else is going on, you can live in that integrity and in that wholeness and live from that space. And then come what may around you, and you will just emanate a pillar. It'll literally feel like a foundation. People will feel your rudder. They will feel you. They will feel your integrity. And then
You don't
that
have
can
to say a word.
Yeah. And like you said, you start living from it naturally.
Yeah, 100%.
And that brings us to our next one, which Andrew, I really want to give you props for this word. It's not something that I feel like it encapsulates so many things. And it's a word that I just hadn't used really that much. Or if I did use it, I thought of it as negative. And you've really helped me to have a new relationship with the word sensitivity. And I feel like if there's anything that's conscious Tom that sort of separates itself, like accountability, valor, integrity, old school dominance men would be like, yes, all those things. And then you throw in the word sensitivity and they're like, I don't want to be sensitive. They're sensitive. And this is the funny thing. They're sensitive to the word sensitivity.
I never thought of it that way.
And that's the problem, is that when you don't honor your own sensitivity, you project your sensitivity. You're using your ego to defend your sensitive parts. If you don't do the work to find out where you're sensitive, if you don't do your trauma work, you will end up fronting and projecting and using your strength, your accountability, your valor, your integrity to protect the little boy inside of you, the part of you that's sensitive. You've got to own that. You've got to understand him. You've got to go there and sit with him. Otherwise, you're going to be running around making sure your external world protects and honors him. You need to be the one that honors the sensitive parts of yourself. And that means doing the healing work. That means doing the trauma work. That means being patient with yourself. That means being patient with your woman and your relationship. That also means there's a part of you that enjoys pleasure and feels pleasure, because sensitivity is not just sensitivity to pain, but it's also sensitivity to pleasure. And if we don't honor the parts of ourselves that feel pleasure, that desire pleasure, that wants these things that we often in the scope of a man's world, that's childish. It's we're almost like beyond pleasure. Pleasure is a part of this whole thing, just like pain is a part of this whole thing. But it's a matter of you bringing it into the fold and integrating it and honoring it and holding it. It's something that Rachel and something that Rosha has taught me so much. It's really honoring what it is to have my pleasure, to reclaim my pleasure, and to be in my pleasure, and to see pleasure as a teaching place, and see pleasure as a place that pushes me forward and challenges me, and is a place to resensitize and not desensitize. And it's often through feeling in the pleasure realms that I've been able to feel in the grief realms. And I start feeling grief, and I start allowing myself to see that grief and pleasure, the grief can be pleasurable, and that pleasure can be sad, and that these things hold these opposites, and that there's something that's much more complicated in us than just, oh, there's something that's good and it's pleasurable. There's something that's bad and it's sad. Yeah, there's more to it than this. And when you start feeling sensitivity, you start feeling nuances and subtlety, and just being more clear, claircognizance, clairvoyant, all these clear words that sort of bring up our inner sensitivity to the world around us. We start seeing the context of everything. We could start seeing, oh, that person over there, pissed. That person over there is sad. That person's got to watch out for that person. That person, you start becoming aware of your context when you start doing your own work, when you start feeling and resensitizing yourself. You can start, when you honor the feminine inside of you, you then start having the virtues of the feminine, which is to be more sensitive to the world around you. And you can access these. All of a sudden, you start having a superpower, because the feminine is truly a superpower. And when you can align your own inner feminine with your masculine, which in this way, I'm going to kind of the refinement, as you said, the masculine is a very sensitive person. Us men, we are very sensitive. We want to hide this and put this away, but we're taking lots of energy to put it away. And what we need to do, bring it all online, so it becomes our ally. And we're able to go forward and move into an authentic place. And that we're not using our power and asking our woman to surrender and to submit so as to placate us, so as to make us feel better, so as to do the work for us, so that when we're down and out, we want her to go and suck our dick so we feel better. We want to go and do this shit for us because we're sad. If you do it from that energy and you're from that frequency, it's gonna chip away, and she's gonna resent, and it's just gonna be, it's not foundational. It's not in integrity. It's a building that's in alignment. But you don't know that unless you're sensitive. Unless you could be sensitive to what's going on, sensitive to her, sensitive to yourself. Just like if you're building a building and you're looking around to see if the structure is solid, you may need tools that check to see the solidity, see how well it's doing. Is it a plumb? Is it square? You might need a tool. You might need to get your square. That hurts you, and you'll be able to you become more sensitive to your surroundings. You can tell whether or not it's plumb. It's the same in your woman. It's the same in the other people around you. And then to stop taking her feelings personally. When you take her feelings personally and you become sensitive to the external world, this is not what we're talking about. It's not becoming becoming sensitive in a manner that takes everything personally. It's actually the opposite. That as we resensitize ourselves, that as we become more aware of our sensitivities, we actually become more strong. We actually have more strength, because we're not running around trying to protect ourselves from our vulnerability. The vulnerability is there when we acknowledge it, but if we let it lead and keep us from acting, or letting that be the driver of the car, that's the problem. And it's only through resensitizing. And it's a big one of this is not numbing yourself in the process. So you'll feel the pain, you will suffer away, feel the pain, and then you can come out of it knowing what it is. And if you just keep numbing yourself, that's the problem. And a lot of men just want to numb themselves so they don't feel the sensitivity. Take it away.
I think of this too, like you mentioned weakness. Men will equate sensitivity with weakness, but that's only because we're projecting our own discomfort of emotions, our discomfort with emotions, and discomfort with what it feels like to be attacked by feminine emotion, to think that sensitivity is somehow dangerous or weak. But to your point, it really is strength, because when we stop making meaning, we like drop the lens that we're seeing what is being shared with us through by our woman, by the world around us, whatever. Instead of receiving it through a distorted lens, we can receive it, not take it personally, and receive it as information. That makes us a better leader. It makes us stronger because we can see how the world around us is responding to us, to see and really have a better, well, more informed view of what's happening in the world around us, including how our submissive is showing up in response to our dominance. Are we being a little bit selfish or needy with it? She's going to show that to you. Are we living out of integrity? She's going to show that to you, but she shows it to you and gives you that information through your sensitivity. And this comes back to this idea that there are two relationships going on in every one relationship. We have the physical relationship and we have the emotional relationship. And we have to tune into both of them. And the last thing I want to mention on sensitivity is, from the masculine point of view, is a receptive thing. This isn't about pouring your heart out. That's the 90s soft man sensitive that we saw. Like, men of our age were raised seeing this as the example on all the sitcoms of what like a sensitive man was supposed to be, was this kind of soft, expressive sensitivity. This kind of sensitivity is the thing that we can do as men, where we walk into a room and we can feel what our woman is feeling like. We can tell what the energy is that she's feeling. Is she cranky? Or is she happy? Or is she open? We can tell that just when we walk into a room and look at her, sometimes through a text message.
Another part of this, I think what you're saying too, is keeping our heart open.
Yeah.
And that's something that I've really learned, is the difference between when I come into a situation and I close my heart down versus when I keep it open. And I think that's essentially what you mean by sensitivity too, is keeping the strength, keep our heart open so we feel what's happening and we're not shutting down. It's easy to dominate when you keep your heart closed. What is it to keep your heart open and lead and feel things around you? That's when it becomes really hard. That's when you feel foolish. That's when you become vulnerable. That's when it takes courage. That's when it takes valor. Just keep that heart open. So I just wanted to add that.
Yeah, really important. I'm glad you jumped in with that, because that ability to maintain an open heart in the presence of, when she's sharing challenging things with you, or specifically responding to ways that you've shown up. Like, if I do something shitty and she's responding to that because I did something shitty, she's going to respond to it. Keeping your heart open and receiving that feedback is the hardest fucking thing that you can do. But the most important, because for me in my life, there's been nothing that has been more of a calling to be a better man and to improve from my failures than keeping my heart open in the presence of her reacting to me being shitty. Because boy, do I not want to repeat that again. Because when I let that in, that fucking hurts, and it should hurt. So very good, important thing there. I'm glad you brought that up. Move on to our fifth of these 6 pillars, the fifth one being presence. And this really follows really well out of sensitivity, because one of the ways that I talk about presence is that a woman needs to feel you feeling her. What does that mean? She needs to feel you feeling her. She's always feeling. we know that men know this about women, right? They're always feeling. They're very much emotional creatures. And as she is in that feeling body, she really needs to know that you are plugged into, connected to that. Not just that you say that you are, but to actually, like, she can feel if you are feeling her. So what does it mean to feel her? If she's angry, feel what that anger feels like in your heart. You have to be sensitive for that. If she's joyful, if she's laughing, feel her joy. What does that feel like in me when Dawn is joyful? When she's playful, when she's sad, when she's stricken with grief? What do her feelings feel like in me? In order to do that, I have to be present with her. I have to be there. Like, I have to actually fucking be there. Not just like sitting there, but really be connected to her. And presence for me is being in the moment, all the way in the moment. And I can't be in the moment if I'm in my head, if I'm stuck in my overthinking and just processing and analyzing. And this is the problem that we get into as men with our natural tendency to want to fix. Because we're damn good at it. We're good fixers. Most men are very good at seeing a solution to a problem and executing to that solution. But the problem with fixing energy is that we lose presence as soon as we go into disapproval of where we are, into needing it to be somewhere else for ourselves to be okay. It's far more important that we're just present with what's actually going on. If we have a solution we want to offer, if we have a way that we want to change the situation that we are noticing in the way that maybe this particular situation is playing out, we can execute that later. We need to be present with the energy that is there right now. We can bring our solutions at a different point. Maybe we don't even need to talk to her about them. Maybe we just make changes with the way that we're living our lives or the way that we're leading her. But we have to get out of our heads. We have to get out of fixing energy. We have to get out of solving energy in order to come back to being fully present. Now, what does it mean to be fully present? One way I say this is we have to be in our body. That's the opposite of being in our head. We have to be present in our body. We have to be in here in every moment. When we're fucking her, we need to have all of our energy in our cock. When we touch her, literally, men watching this, when you touch her arm, when you're sitting next to her, put your attention in your fingertips. Be attentive, put your consciousness, your awareness into your fingertips before you touch her, and do it with intentionality rather than just like just rubbing her arm because I'm rubbing her arm. Like, no, bring some presence to it. Be present in the part of you that's touching her.
Yeah.
And be out of your own head with it. You got to get out of your own thinking about it and just be where you are. And I can't talk about presence without also talking about numbing again. You mentioned that in terms of sensitivity, which is why we numb ourselves out. We numb because the sensitivity hurts, but in order to be present, we can't be numbed out. We can't be distracted. We can't be in our video games. We can't be like looking at our cell phone every 5 seconds because it dinged with a notification. We can't be up on substances. Like, you can't be drunk and present. You can't have very much alcohol in your system at all and be present. You lose it very quickly. Numbing has to go in order to be able to be present. And if the numbing has been a coping mechanism to deal with your discomfort with being present, that's a really good place to start looking inward. is with why is it that I'm numbing myself and what is it that I'm numbing myself from? Because the reason that we go into our heads, the reason we go into thinking and fixing and analyzing is because we don't feel comfortable in here, because these bodies get all mucked up with trauma. This is the concept of the body keeps the score. We physically store these traumatic events from our past, and then we try to avoid them because our body is just full of this garbage. And we end up in our heads and we end up numbing and we end up in shame and all of these other places because we can't be present, because being present means being in the body, and the body doesn't feel good to be in. So then we numb ourselves out from it, or we escape from it with distractions and with overthinking. So in order to bring dominance in a conscious way, in a way that honors awareness and truth, we have to do the work to be able to come back into presence, to come back into our bodies so that we can feel her, so she can feel us feeling her, so that we can touch her with intentionality, so that we can come to her with some sense of awareness of what we're doing and actually be there instead of just being there. What else does presence do when you hear that word?
I like what you said about accepting what is. I think part of the challenge with presence is we get into a notion of being like, oh, that's bad or that's good. If it's bad, we don't want to be here with it. If it's good, we want to be here with it. Oh, she's just going on and on. Why am I needing to even be here with that? You don't know. Every moment is the only thing we have. It reminds me of Eckhart Tolle's the now. There's this
Yep.
now moment. There's this presence. That's all we got in this life. The past, the future, none of that's guaranteed. None of that's actually real. The only reality we have is the present moment. And so every time we're not in the present moment, we're not in reality. We're not here. And she can feel that. And presence allows us to be spontaneous and to act from a place that feels spontaneous. It may be something that's grounded in all these different modalities that allows us to just act, but it feels like we just know what to do when we need to do it. It's very similar to being an athlete or to doing any type of sport or dance. There's a presence in great athletes and great performers. It's the same when you're with your woman, when you're making love. But every time you're with her, you're making love. Every time you're listening, you're making love. Every time you're in her presence, you're making love with her. You need to be present. She can feel it. Every time that you take your presence away, you're taking away potentiality. You're taking away the potentiality for pleasure. You're taking potentiality for dominance and surrender. Presence, with your presence is power. When the masculine is present and it's living in integrity and valor and feeling the moment and sensitivity, it is inherently dominant. It is not something that you have to go and claim your dominance. When you're present during challenging moments and you're doing all of these things, the result of it is dominance. And I think that's what you speak about so eloquently and have helped me to really understand what's occurring. And I love what you said about accepting what is, because I feel like that's what brings me to our last one and our last pillar, which is regenerative. Being a conscious dom is being regenerative. And what we mean by that is that we have to be alchemists. We have to take the dross of life, the failures, the shit, the crap, and we have to turn it in to gold. Everything in life that comes our way is but an opportunity to turn challenging moments into productive moments, into health. It's like a healthy soil. Talked about this before on the podcast. We've talked about in nature, when there's death, when there's decay, there's compost. It enriches the soil. And out of that, it's a more nutritious soil. It's a more nutritious life. A man who's gone through and faced trials and faced death and faced grief and faced failure, coming out of that births a new man, births a new energy. This is regeneration, like a reliving, a quality, that there is death and rebirth. And a lot of men especially get stuck and they just are playing the loop of their failures in their head and failures and have a whole litany of excuses why they can't proceed in their life. But every single one of those failures, every single one of those challenges actually is the very foundational of what it is to do this. The harder
The
you
chef's
work
kiss.
at it, the better it will be. You actually, it is through the grit, it is through the failure, it's through the struggle, it is through the pain, it is through the showing up with valor, with integrity, with sensitivity, with presence, with accountability that you rebirth. So the regenerative, when we use the spirit, encapsulates the whole quality, the whole presence. Everything's regenerative. She comes to you with pain. She comes to you with crap. She's pissed off at you. In that moment, if you hold firm, if you hold strong, you put her in her place in with sensitivity, with an open heart, with firmness, with strength, with all of these things, that moment can immediately be transformed into a beautiful moment, until this awesome moment where you can take her and fuck her out of that. But that requires you to not react, to not be taking it personally, to not be a victim. It requires you to take accountability for the moment, take accountability for your feelings. This is what it is, this regenerative quality that allows you to take any moment and turn it into gold. That moment, extend the timeline. You can take a challenging moment, a challenging life, and turn it into gold. A woman, I can tell you from experience, I was flat broke. I didn't have a damn thing going on in my life. And I was able to be with many pleasurable, beautiful women because I had the capacity to take a moment and to take a regenerate a difficult, challenging moment, claim the moment. And it is in that claiming of the moment that women want. They are in the present moment. They are in the now. They are in the now. And you are the one in your head thinking that it's all these past stuff. I'm still dealing with this. I deal with this a lot. As you get older, it seems like it's harder. It seems that way. But the potential is even greater because you have more wisdom. You have more capacity to do the real work and to stand in integrity and to stand in a place where your whole life can be built on these foundational tools and these foundational ways. And so it takes humility. It takes an acceptance of what is. It takes being humbled. It takes collapsing and coming back up. When I spoke about this weekend, there was a moment where we were out in public and Rachel spoke something to me and I completely collapsed. Someone walking by would have no idea that I collapsed. All I did was I closed my heart off. I closed my heart off. And she could feel me closing my heart. And I grew disinterested in the activity. I lacked presence. I collapsed in that moment. And it proceeded for where, as the night proceeded, it got worse and I got more and more closed. And then all of a sudden, she fired at me. I didn't do well with that fire in that moment. And I reacted and I punched a wall and I got pissed. In that moment, it was not regenerative. In that moment and in that day, it was not regenerative. It was a full on, what happened 24 hours later, I was able to look at the situation. I was able to do my work. She didn't feel any better. Actually, she much worse. But I went, left her, did my work, said I would be back, held my ground, showed up and turned that very challenging evening and moments into something that alchemized the entire day and entire relationship. And out of that was able to look at some things in my life where that needed attention and that where I wasn't showing up to and where I wasn't doing the work in these particular blind spots. And this is where your woman is there to show you where you need to do your work. And don't be afraid if you collapse. I collapse. It's not the end of the world. What it means is that there are tools to come back from it. And how long does it take you? I always think about that. Does the collapse take a moment? Split second, 3 seconds, 3 minutes, 24 hours. Right now, I'm down to the longest I collapse, I would say, of late is in the hours range. I rarely collapse days. I remember the last time I've collapsed for days. It used to be months. I think there was even years of collapse. It's way better. And I think that this is what, as you proceed and doing conscious time, it doesn't mean your life gets easier. It doesn't mean that you don't have challenges. It doesn't mean you don't feel these pains. It means that you can face the challenges. It means that when you feel shitty, the time of you feeling shitty is less. It means that you have tools to get yourself out of the holes that you're in. That's what it's about. It's not about not having a collapse. It's not about not feeling shitty or not showing up exquisitely at all times. You're not fucking perfect. It just matters. You've got tools. You've got a way to come out. It's hard. You'll fall down. You come back up. I do. And I look to these things. I look to these values. I look to you. I look at my life and say, that's not becoming. Come back. Do the work. Show up. Respond, not react. I spent a whole afternoon rereading this book that's been really helpful for me. Brad Stolberg's Master of Change book. Highly recommend. It's a great book. And there's a whole section of that in responding and not reacting. And it was that book, along with the work that I mentioned earlier with the Rosha and the ladder and the mud room, the combination of that book and these practices that I used with the Rosha, that I was able to get myself out of that hole that I was in that day and come out the other side and be strong and really hold Rachel. And she actually did her work, which is she got more and more feminine. And so it made me feel more and more what was happening. And I had to hold the ground. If I would have increased my feminine, we would have been out to lunch. So it really was something. It was a great testament to this regeneration and this regenerative quality where you could die and then be reborn on the other side.
One of the things I've noticed in this for myself is like the timeline getting shorter as
Yeah.
you get a little bit better at this and get more practiced and rehearsed at coming back from these collapses. Is it does eventually get to a point when you work on this consistently and you choose to take that timeline and zoom that timeline out a little bit. If you keep working on this over a 5-year period, what gets to start happening for you is that you catch yourself before you collapse. So you don't. Or you've been through this before, you've done your work on it, you've healed from it, from whatever was causing the collapse. Because every collapse comes from pain that we're carrying inside of us that we've stuffed.
Right.
And it's getting hit, it's getting activated by something that's happening in the moment. It's not about what's happening in the moment. It's about something from the past getting activated in us. So when we have these reactive moments, we're just reliving old pain. It's not about what's happening right now at all. As you heal that pain, there's less of it in there to get hit. But when something does, and you notice the texture of yourself when you maybe about to start going into one of these like heart closures, one of these pullbacks, and you can catch yourself and say, interesting, that almost happened. I'm just going to set that in my pocket here and come back to that. For me, it's journaling. That's my biggest way of doing this. I'm going to come back and journal on that later, try to sort out what almost happened there. Or when these things do happen, you can shake yourself out of them quickly. There's almost nothing sexier to a woman than watching a man who has fallen apart go, oh, fuck. I'm sorry about that. I fell apart there. I'm back. I'm good. And bringing yourself back to presence after you've collapsed so that you don't have to go all the way into the muck with her and take her down there with you, but to come back out of it, to shake it off in the middle of it, watch her respond to that level of self-control, that
Right.
level of inner strength to pull yourself out of that, when her experience of you may just be watching you like fall into it for hours or days or whatever. Not today. I'm sorry. I almost lost myself there. I don't want to do that today. I want to be here with you. I want to be present. But you can shake that off. But this does get harder as we get older, as you mentioned. It'll get harder as we get older because every time that there's a collapse that needs to be rebuilt, it's admitting that we don't know everything. It's admitting that we're not perfect. And the older we get, the harder it is to admit that there's some stuff that we've never worked on. It's still like that's still in there from our childhoods. And it's, fuck, I turned 44 here pretty soon. You telling me that this thing that hurt my feelings when I was 6 is still in there and causing me to freak out like this as a 44-year-old? Like, come on. But if it's true and you've some money, you got to make some gold out of it, to use your alchemist.
Yeah, and I agree with you. It's our judgment of ourselves being as we get older. But I also think as we become more and more conscious and more aware, it's like someone who's raising their standards. When you raise your standards, you care more. The problem with, as Jordan Peterson said, when you make a beautiful room, everything else becomes ugly. It's the same thing that when you become more and more conscious, you become more and more aware of all the times you're falling short. And so you become more sensitive to your shortcomings and to where the potential for you become more aware of the things that you need to take responsibility for. So it literally does become more challenging because there's more for you to be conscious of. As you heighten your consciousness and God consciousness, there is more and more for you to deal with. And that's actually it literally does become harder.
Yeah. And because you realize that you thought you had it all together. And when really all you were doing was just gripping onto the, like you're hanging off of a cliff, gripping on by your fingertips, trying not to fall off but you thought you had it all together and you realize, holy shit, I've been just about to fall apart. I've been just about to fall apart in every single part of my life because I have not brought awareness to it. I've just been avoiding and avoiding and avoiding.
Right.
And the last thing I want to say on this before we wrap this up is every single shitty thing that's ever happened to me in my life has turned into something good. Something good has come out of every single thing. And the shittier the thing is, the better I've gotten because of it, because I've been willing to show up and look for where I can improve through this. And that's a beautiful piece of what we can make out of collapses. It's just being willing to say, this is happening for me, not to me. And we can look at it with that perspective. We can start then to approach it instead of I'm a fuck up. We can approach it like what's here for me.
And I think that's then identifying with what you said. If it happens for us, not to us, identify yourself as someone who's able to be an alchemist, someone who's here to regenerate, who takes these difficult, challenging situations. I got this, and you could transform it. And the tools of transformation are taking accountability, being valorous, having integrity, being sensitive, having presence, and the whole thing becomes a regenerative process where any moment cycles back and turns you into gold.
Absolutely. So these are the pillars or the principles of conscious dominance. And for men tuning into this podcast who want to approach dom sub relationships in a way that's healthier, more loving, more like kind to yourself, kind to your woman, that works in a loving relationship over the long run. If you start to live your life in alignment with these kind of principles, you can not only have more fulfilling relationships in dominance and submission, but you can have a more fulfilling relationship with yourself. And that's where all of this starts, is internally. So thank you for tuning into this episode. We appreciate it. We're glad to have all of you as listeners and watchers, and stay tuned for the next episode.
Thank you. Thank you all. Thanks, Andrew.